Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the memorial wall, her dark eyes reflecting the images that played across the massive screen. Fire consumed continents, oceans boiled away. Cities that had stood for thousands of years turned to glass in seconds. The same scenes had played every day for 3,000 years, and they would continue until the debt was paid. Earth died on this day, she whispered to the empty corridor. Her voice carried the weight of generations who had spoken those same words. We remember. The ship around her hummed with quiet efficiency. The Terran's last hope stretched 20 kilometers from bow to stern, home to nearly 2 million souls who had never seen a real sky. Every surface gleamed with purpose. Every corridor served the mission. Every life aboard existed for one reason, to return home and make things right. Sarah's grandfather had told her stories of grass that moved in the wind. Her grandmother spoke of rain that fell from clouds instead of recycling systems. But those were just stories now. Reality was the cold metal walls and the endless journey through space. Reality was preparing for the day they would face the ones who took everything from them. Admiral Chen to the bridge, came the voice through her communication device. Sarah touched the memorial wall one last time, feeling the warmth of the screen against her palm. Somewhere in those images was the house where her ancestors lived. Somewhere in that fire was everything humanity used to be. The bridge buzzed with activity when she arrived. Officers moved between stations with practiced ease. Screens showed star charts, sensor readings, and the positions of 11 other ships, just like theirs. The other survivors, the other witnesses. Report, Sarah said as she took her place in the captain's chair. Commander Marcus Rodriguez turned from the navigation station. Long-range sensors have confirmed it, Admiral. We've found them. Sarah felt her heart skip. After 3,000 years of searching, of following cold trails and ancient star maps, they had finally located the Zephyrian homeworld, the place where the orders came from, the heart of the empire that burned Earth to ash. Distance? She asked. 47 light years. At current speed, we'll reach their space in 6 months. 6 months. After 30 centuries, 6 months felt like nothing and everything at the same time. Sarah looked around the bridge at faces she had known since childhood. These people had trained their entire lives for this moment. Their parents had trained for it. Their grandparents had died still training for it. And the other fleets? All 11 ships report ready. Fleet Commander Zhang estimates they'll reach the target zone within the same time frame. Sarah nodded. 12 ships, 12 million humans. All that remained of a species that once numbered in the billions, but they were not the same humans who had died on Earth. 3,000 years of genetic modification and technological advancement had changed them, made them stronger, made them ready. The Atlas artificial intelligence materialized beside her chair, taking the form of a tall man in a simple uniform. His face looked kind, but Sarah knew better. Atlas had been programmed with one directive: ensure humanity's revenge. Every decision the AI made served that goal. Admiral, Atlas said in his calm voice, we should discuss the final preparations. Sarah stood and walked to the large window that showed the stars ahead. Somewhere among those distant lights was their target. The Zephyrians probably didn't even remember Earth anymore. 3,000 years was a long time, even for a spacefaring civilization. They had likely conquered and destroyed dozens of other worlds since then. Have you calculated their current military strength? She asked. Based on intercepted communications and long-range observations, the Zephyrian Empire now controls 43 star systems. Their technology has advanced, but not at the rate ours has. They've grown comfortable, complacent. Good. Sarah turned back to face her crew. What about their defenses around the homeworld? Lieutenant Anna Foster looked up from her tactical station. Significant, but not impossible. They have orbital defense platforms and a fleet of warships. However, our simulations show a 94% chance of success if we coordinate with the other human fleets. Sarah almost smiled. 94%. She had hoped for 50. Her ancestors had faced worse odds when they fled Earth in whatever ships they could find. Most of those first refugee vessels had failed. Engine breakdowns, life support failures, simple bad luck in the vast emptiness of space. Only 12 ships had survived long enough to begin the long work of rebuilding. "What's our population status?" Sarah asked. Dr. Elizabeth Park stepped forward. From her position near the medical station, 2,400,000 souls aboard this vessel, all in good health. The genetic modifications continue to prove successful. Our people are stronger, faster, and more resilient than baseline humans. The cybernetic integrations are also performing beyond expectations. Sarah nodded. The modifications had been necessary. Space was harsh, and revenge required perfection. Over the centuries, humanity had changed itself piece by piece. Better reflexes for combat, enhanced strength for boarding operations, improved cognitive function for tactical planning. Some barely looked human anymore, but they were still human where it mattered, in their hearts and in their memories. And our weapons systems? All primary systems operational, reported Chief Engineer David Kim. The bioships have reached full maturity. Armor plating is at maximum density. The quantum fold drives are ready for the final jump sequence. Bioships. That had been humanity's greatest breakthrough. Instead of building vessels from metal and circuits, they had learned to grow them from specially modified organic material. The ships could heal damage, adapt to threats, and think for themselves. The Zephyrians still built their vessels the old way, dead metal and static electronics. They would not be ready for what humanity had become. Sarah returned to her chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. Every screen on the vessel showed her face. Every person aboard stopped what they were doing to listen. "People of the Terran's last hope," she began. "Today we received the news our ancestors have waited 3,000 years to hear. We have found them. We have found the ones who murdered our world." Silence filled the ship. Even the hum of the engines seemed to quiet. "In 6 months, we will arrive at their home system. In 6 months, we will begin the work our grandparents and great-grandparents prepared us for. We will make them pay for what they took from us." She paused, looking into the camera and thinking of all the faces watching her. Children who had never played in real dirt. Adults who had never breathed unfiltered air. Elderly people who had spent their entire lives preparing for a moment they might not live to see. We are no longer the weak species that fled Earth in broken ships. We are something new, something stronger, something they will fear when they realize what they created. We are the children of Earth, and we are coming home. The communication ended, and Sarah sat back in her chair. Around her, the bridge crew returned to their duties with renewed purpose. They all knew what lay ahead. Years of planning were about to become reality. Atlas appeared beside her again. "The other fleet commanders request a final strategy meeting. Schedule it for tomorrow. We have 6 months to coordinate our approach. I want this to be perfect." "Of course, Admiral. After 3,000 years, we will not fail." Sarah looked out at the stars again. Earth was gone, but they carried its memory in their hearts and its vengeance in their hands. The Zephyrians had made one fatal mistake when they destroyed humanity's homeworld. They had left survivors. Soon, they would learn the cost of that mistake. The transformation began at dawn, ship time. Sarah Chen watched from the observation deck as her people prepared for what was coming. 3,000 years of evolution had created something that would have terrified their ancestors. In the training bays below, soldiers moved through combat drills that defied the laws of physics as Earth humans once knew them. Marcus Reeves, one of the enhanced warriors, leaped 15 feet straight up and landed silently on a narrow beam. His bones were laced with synthetic materials that made them unbreakable. His muscles had been genetically modified to produce 3 times normal human strength. Most importantly, his nervous system had been rewired to process information at superhuman speeds. "Show me the weapons test," Sarah said to Atlas. The AI gestured and the wall became transparent. In the testing chamber, a volunteer stood perfectly still as energy weapons fired at him from multiple directions. A shimmering field around his body absorbed the impacts harmlessly. Personal shields that drew power from the body's own electrical field. Another innovation born from necessity. The Zephyrians still rely on projectile weapons and basic energy beams, Atlas explained. Their defensive technology has not advanced significantly in the past millennium. They have become comfortable with their superiority over other species. Sarah nodded. Comfort was the enemy of progress. The Zephyrians had stopped innovating because they didn't need to. No species in their empire could challenge them. They controlled dozens of worlds through fear and superior firepower. But they had never faced an enemy that had spent 3,000 years preparing specifically to defeat them. A message appeared on Sarah's communication device. The other fleet commanders were ready for their strategy meeting. She made her way to the quantum communication chamber, where holographic projections of 11 other humans appeared around a circular table. These were the leaders of humanity's scattered fleets, each commanding a ship identical to her own. "Status reports," Sarah said as she took her seat. Admiral Liu Zhang of the Terran's Wrath spoke first. "My ship reports full readiness. All bioweapon systems are mature and responsive. Crew modifications are complete. The Terran's Fury is ready," announced Admiral Hassan al-Rashid. "Our infiltration specialists have been practicing with the new phase shift technology. They can walk through solid matter for up to 30 minutes. One by one, the other commanders reported similar readiness. 12 ships, each with capabilities that would seem like magic to the humans who had fled Earth. The bioships themselves were perhaps the most dramatic change. Instead of cold metal hulls, the vessels were grown from modified organic compounds. They could heal damage, adapt their shape, and even reproduce if given enough time and resources. "What's our intelligence on current Zephyrian capabilities?" asked Admiral Chen. Atlas materialized in the center of the table, his projection visible to all 12 commanders. The Zephyrian Empire has expanded significantly since the destruction of Earth. They now control 43 star systems and have enslaved or eliminated over 200 species. However, their technology has plateaued. They rely on the same basic weapons and defensive systems they used against Earth. And their military structure? Highly centralized. All major decisions come from the home system of Zephyros Prime. They maintain large fleets around conquered worlds but keep their most advanced vessels near their homeworld. Admiral Crickstar commands their frontier defenses. He's considered their greatest military mind. Admiral Zhang leaned forward. "How many ships are we facing?" "Approximately 3,000 vessels of various sizes throughout their empire. However, only about 400 are stationed near Zephyros Prime. The rest are scattered across their territory, maintaining control over conquered populations." The numbers seemed overwhelming, but Sarah felt no fear. Quantity meant nothing when quality was so different. A single human bioship could outfight 10 traditional Zephyrian vessels. Their crews were enhanced beyond anything the enemy could imagine. Most importantly, they were fighting for something the Zephyrians had forgotten: justice for the dead. "We need to move carefully," Sarah said. "Our goal isn't just military victory. We want them to understand what they did. We want them to experience what our ancestors felt when Earth burned." "Agreed," said Admiral al-Rashid. "The psychological impact is as important as the physical destruction. They need to know that the species they thought they had exterminated has returned." Atlas brought up a three-dimensional map of Zephyrian space. Red dots marked their major colonies and military installations. Blue lines showed patrol routes and communication networks. Green highlighted their most vulnerable targets. "I suggest we begin with isolated outposts," the AI said. "Let them discover what we've become gradually. Fear spreads faster than news in their empire. By the time we reach their homeworld, they'll be terrified of shadows." Admiral Zhang nodded. "The mining colony at Kepler 442. It's heavily defended but far from reinforcements. Perfect for a demonstration." "What about civilian populations?" asked Admiral Rodriguez from the Terran's Justice. Sarah considered the question carefully. During the long journey, they had debated this many times. The Zephyrians had shown no mercy to Earth civilians. Entire cities had been vaporized in seconds. Children, artists, teachers, scientists, all burned away as if they had never existed. "We are not them," Sarah said finally. "Any world that releases enslaved populations and surrenders will be spared. But any world that resists, any ship that fires on us, will face the consequences. And their homeworld? Asked Admiral Singh from the Terran's Vengeance. Their homeworld will burn, Sarah said quietly. Just like ours did. The meeting continued for 6 hours as they refined their strategy. The attack would begin in 4 months, giving them time to position all 12 fleets. They would strike simultaneously at multiple targets, overwhelming the Zephyrian communication networks. By the time the enemy understood what was happening, it would be too late to organize an effective defense. As the other commanders signed off, Sarah remained in the communication chamber. The weight of command felt heavier than usual. In 4 months she would give the order that would begin humanity's revenge. Millions of Zephyrians would die. Their civilization would crumble. Their children would grow up in a galaxy where their species was no longer supreme. She thought about the last message Earth had sent before the planet died. A simple transmission that had reached the fleeing refugee ships months later. Remember us. Make them pay. 3,000 years later, humanity was finally ready to honor that request. Sarah left the chamber and walked through the ship's corridors. Everywhere she looked, she saw the evidence of what they had become. Engineers with cybernetic implants that let them interface directly with the ship's systems. Soldiers whose bodies had been modified for combat in vacuum. Scientists who could process information faster than any computer Earth had ever built. They were still human in the ways that mattered. They loved their families. They honored their dead. They remembered their home. But they were also something new, something forged in the cold of space and tempered by 3 millennia of preparation. The Zephyrians had created their own doom when they destroyed Earth. They had left just enough survivors to carry forward humanity's anger, intelligence, and determination. Now those survivors had grown into something that could challenge the greatest empire in the galaxy. In 4 months, the Zephyrians would learn that some mistakes cannot be undone, some wounds never heal, and some species never forgive. Admiral Crickster stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. The Kepler 442 mining station floated in the distance, its lights twinkling against the darkness of space. It was a routine patrol, the kind he had commanded hundreds of times over his 30-year career. The mining operation extracted rare minerals from the system's asteroid belt, providing materials for the Empire's continued expansion. Nothing ever happened at Kepler 442. The local slave populations had been properly subdued decades ago. No, pirate ships dared venture this deep into Zephyrian space. Even the most rebellious species had learned to fear the Empire's response to resistance. "Sir," called his communications officer, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the mining station." Crickstar turned from the viewing screen. His scaled skin caught the bridge lighting, giving him the appearance of polished metal. Like all Zephyrians, he stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums. His people had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived, and that strength had carried them across the galaxy. "Put it through." The station commander appeared on the main screen, his face tight with confusion. "Admiral, our long-range sensors are detecting something. Multiple contacts approaching from outside the system." "What kind of contacts? Pirates? Refugees?" "We don't know, sir. The sensor readings don't match any known ship designs. The objects appear to be organic in nature." Crickstar felt a slight chill. In 3 decades of service, he had never encountered anything like that. "Show me the sensor data." The screen changed to display the readings from the mining station. 12 objects moved through space toward the system, but they didn't look like any ships he had ever seen. Instead of the clean lines and geometric shapes of proper spacecraft, these things appeared to be alive. They pulsed with energy and seemed to shift their form as they moved. "Distance and speed? They'll reach the outer system in approximately 6 hours, Admiral. But sir, there's something else. We tried to scan them more closely and one of our probe ships simply vanished." "Vanished?" It was there one moment and gone the next. No explosion, no debris field. Just gone. Crickstar studied the readings more carefully. Whatever these objects were, They represented technology beyond anything in Zephyrian databases. The Empire had conquered over 200 species in its expansion across the galaxy, and none had possessed anything remotely similar. "Transmit a warning to the approaching vessels," he ordered. "This system is under Zephyrian protection. They will identify themselves and state their business or face the consequences." The communications officer worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with concern. "Sir, they're not responding to our transmissions. In fact, they seem to be jamming our signals somehow. Then we respond with force. Signal the fleet to intercept." Krikstar commanded a force of 30 warships, more than enough to handle any threat in this remote system. His vessels moved into formation as they accelerated toward the mysterious contacts. The Zephyrian ships were powerful and well-armed, products of technology refined through centuries of conquest. As they approached the edge of the system, the strange objects became clearer on the sensors. They were definitely ships of some kind, but unlike anything in the Imperial databases. Their surfaces seemed to ripple and flow like living tissue. Energy readings suggested weapon systems, but the configurations were completely alien. "Open a channel to all ships," Krikstar commanded. "Attention unknown vessels. You have entered Zephyrian space without authorization. Surrender immediately, or you will be destroyed." The response came not through communication systems, but broadcast, on every frequency simultaneously. The voice spoke in perfect Zephyrian, but there was something wrong with it, something that made Krikstar's skin crawl. "Zephyrians of the mining station Kepler 442. 3,000 years ago, your empire destroyed a world called Earth. You murdered 12 billion innocent beings. You burned cities and boiled oceans. You committed genocide against a species that had never harmed you." Krikstar felt confused. Earth? He had never heard of such a world. The Empire had destroyed many planets over the centuries, but they rarely bothered to record the names of primitive worlds. The voice continued. "We are the children of Earth. We are the survivors you failed to kill. We have spent 3 millennia preparing for this moment. Today, your debt begins to be paid." "Sir," called his tactical officer, "the unknown ships are accelerating. They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes. All ships, battle stations, prepare to engage." The Zephyrian fleet formed a defensive line, their weapons powering up and shields activating. 30 of the Empire's finest warships against 12 unknown vessels. The numbers strongly favored Krikstar's forces. But as the strange ships closed distance, they began to do things that should have been impossible. One of them simply disappeared from sensors only to reappear behind the Zephyrian formation. Another seemed to phase through space itself, moving from one position to another without crossing the distance between. "Open fire," Krikstar ordered. The Zephyrian ships unleashed their full firepower. Energy beams and missile salvos filled the space between the two fleets. But instead of explosions and debris, something impossible happened. The weapons passed harmlessly through the alien vessels as if they weren't there. "What?" Krikstar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "How are they doing that?" His answer came in the form of return fire. The alien ships released weapons that looked like living creatures made of pure energy. These things moved through space with purpose and intelligence, seeking out Zephyrian vessels and striking with devastating effect. The first ship to be hit was the cruiser Domination. The energy creature struck its shields and somehow passed through them without resistance. The ship's hull began to dissolve from the inside out, as if the very atoms were being taken apart and rearranged. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Krikstar shouted, but it was already too late. The alien vessels moved through his formation like predators among prey. Their weapons ignored every defense the Zephyrians possessed. Shields, armor, point defense systems. Nothing seemed to slow them down. One by one, his ships began to die. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the aliens." "Put it through." This time, the image that appeared on his screen made Krikstar step backward in shock. The being that looked back at him appeared almost human, but changed in fundamental ways. Its eyes held an intelligence that seemed ancient beyond measure. Its face showed no emotion except cold determination. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Fleet. You are Admiral Krickstar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species murdered mine 3,000 years ago. Today you begin to understand the consequences of that action. Human? Krickstar found his voice. That's impossible. We destroyed your entire species. You destroyed our world. You killed our people. But you made one critical mistake. You left survivors. Those survivors have spent 3 millennia becoming something you cannot imagine, something you cannot defeat. On his tactical display, Krickstar watched helplessly as another of his ships dissolved under alien fire. What do you want? Justice. Vengeance. The payment of a debt 3,000 years overdue. The human's expression never changed. Surrender this system and release all enslaved populations, and your personnel will be allowed to live. Resist, and share the fate you gave to Earth. Krickstar looked around his bridge. Half his fleet was already gone, destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist, wielded by a species that shouldn't be alive. His remaining ships were scattered and demoralized, facing an enemy they couldn't hurt. Never, he said through gritted teeth. The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender to inferior species. Then you have chosen death. The transmission ended and the alien ships pressed their attack with renewed intensity. Krickstar's flagship shuddered as one of the energy creatures struck its hull. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge as systems began to fail. As his ship died around him, Krickstar finally understood the magnitude of his empire's mistake. They had created their own nemesis when they destroyed Earth. They had given birth to an enemy that would not rest until every Zephyrian world burned. The last thing he saw was the human admiral's face on his screen, watching with cold satisfaction as another debt was paid. In the mining station below, the enslaved populations watched in amazement as their captors fled in terror. Strange ships filled the sky, and a voice spoke in dozens of languages. You are free. The humans have returned. The age of Zephyrian dominance is ending. Across the galaxy, the first reports began to reach Zephyrian command centers. Kepler 442 had fallen to an unknown enemy. Admiral Krickstar's fleet had been destroyed. An extinct species had somehow returned to claim vengeance. The war for Earth's revenge had begun. Supreme Commander Veltar stood in the war room of the Imperial Palace on Zephyros Prime, staring at the holographic display that showed the collapse of his empire. Red indicators marked worlds under attack. Yellow showed systems that had gone silent. Blue indicated the few remaining strongholds still under Zephyrian control. In just 6 months, the humans had destroyed everything the Empire had built over 3 millennia. Report, he commanded, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional pose of imperial authority. General Morquez stepped forward, her usually confident demeanor shaken. The Tau Ceti system has fallen. The Arcturus colonies have surrendered. The mining operations at Wolf 359 have been completely destroyed. We estimate that 40% of our territory is now under human control. How is this possible? Veltar turned from the display to face his officers. 6 months ago, we had never heard of these creatures. Now they're destroying the greatest empire in galactic history. Sir, Intelligence Director Quindar spoke from his position near the communications array. We've analyzed the surviving records from Admiral Krickstar's final battle. The humans are using technology that operates on principles we don't understand. Their ships appear to be living organisms rather than constructed vessels. Their weapons ignore our defensive systems entirely. Veltar had read those reports. Ships that could phase through solid matter. Weapons that dissolved molecular bonds. Soldiers who could survive in hard vacuum without protection. It sounded like fantasy, but the evidence was undeniable. What about our own technological capabilities? Can our scientists adapt? Dr. Zen Mara, the Empire's chief researcher, stepped forward reluctantly. Supreme Commander, we've tried to reverse engineer their technology from battle recordings. Our conclusion is that they've somehow merged organic and mechanical systems in ways that shouldn't be possible. Their ships are literally alive. They can heal damage, adapt to new threats, and even reproduce given sufficient resources. And our own vessels? Dead metal and static electronics, sir. Built using the same principles we've relied on for centuries. We never needed to innovate because no species could challenge us. The scientist's voice carried a note of bitter regret. The humans spent 3,000 years solving the problem of how to defeat us specifically. They designed every weapon, every ship, every soldier with that single goal in mind. Veltar moved to the great window that looked out over the capital city of Zephyros Prime. Below, millions of Zephyrians went about their daily lives, unaware that their empire was crumbling. They had lived for generations believing themselves the rightful rulers of the galaxy. The idea that they could be conquered was simply unthinkable. "Sir," General Morquez said carefully, "we've received intelligence reports from our frontier worlds. The humans they're not behaving like any species we've encountered before." "Explain." "When they take a world, they immediately free any enslaved populations. They provide them with weapons, ships, even training. Species that we've oppressed for centuries are now actively helping the humans locate our strongholds." Veltar felt his stomach sink. The Empire controlled hundreds of species across dozens of worlds. If those populations turned against them, the Zephyrian military would be facing enemies on every front. How many of our subject species have joined them? "Nearly all of them, sir. The few that remain loyal do so only because they fear retaliation if we regain control." A new voice cut through the discussion. "Supreme Commander, we have an incoming transmission. It's from the human fleet." Veltar turned to see the communication officer's hands shaking as she worked her controls. "Put it through." The holographic display changed to show a human face. The creature looked almost like the Zephyrians' own records of primitive species they had conquered, but there were clear differences. Enhanced bone structure, eyes that seemed to see everything at once, an aura of barely contained power that made even Veltar step backward. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Liberation Fleet," the human said in perfect Zephyrian. "I address Supreme Commander Veltar and the ruling council of the Zephyrian Empire." "You're speaking to him," Veltar replied, forcing his voice to remain steady. "What do you want, human?" 3,000 years ago, your empire destroyed a world called Earth. 12 billion of my people died in a single day. Children burned in their schools. Mothers watched their babies vaporize in their arms. Entire cities full of artists, teachers, scientists, and dreamers were reduced to radioactive ash. Veltar searched his memory but found nothing. Earth was just another primitive world among hundreds they had eliminated over the millennia. "We have conquered many worlds. The strong rule the weak. That is the natural order." The natural order. Admiral Chen's expression remained completely calm, but something in her eyes made Veltar's skin crawl. "You speak of the natural order, while sitting on a throne built from the bones of innocence. Today you learn what the natural order really means. You cannot threaten the Zephyrian Empire from 40 star systems away," Veltar said, though his confidence was fading with each word. "Our homeworld is the most heavily defended position in the galaxy. Supreme Commander, look at your tactical displays. Tell me what you see." Veltar glanced at the military screens around the room. His officers were frantically working their controls, their faces growing pale as they processed the incoming data. "Sir," General Morquez spoke in a whisper, "our long-range sensors are detecting massive contacts at the edge of the system. Hundreds of ships, they just appeared. Impossible. Nothing could get past our outer defenses without being detected." Admiral Chen's image smiled for the first time, and it was the most terrifying expression Veltar had ever seen. "You still think like the species that destroyed Earth. You assume your technology is superior simply because you've never been challenged. We have been studying your defenses for 3,000 years. We know exactly how to bypass them." The tactical displays around the room lit up with contact indicators. Not dozens of ships, but hundreds. The human fleet had somehow positioned itself throughout the Zephyros system, without triggering a single alarm. "Your orbital defense platforms are already under our control," Admiral Chen continued. "Your patrol fleets have been neutralized. Your communication networks are compromised. The only reason your homeworld still exists is because we choose to let it exist." What do you want?" Veltar found himself asking the question he had sworn never to speak. Justice. Your species will face the same choice you gave to Earth and every other world you've conquered. Surrender unconditionally or burn. The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender. Then the Zephyrian Empire ends today. The transmission cut off, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Around Veltar, his officers stared at displays showing impossible numbers of enemy contacts. The humans had brought more ships to this single battle than the entire Zephyrian navy possessed. "Sir," the communications officer said in a breaking voice, "we're receiving surrender demands from all major population centers. The humans are broadcasting on every channel simultaneously." The main display changed to show the message playing across their homeworld. Admiral Chen's face appeared on every screen, speaking in calm, measured tones. "Citizens of Zephyros Prime, 3,000 years ago, your empire committed genocide against the human species. Today, you face the consequences of that choice. We offer you the same mercy you showed to Earth. None. However, we are not you. Surrender immediately. Renounce your empire's claims to all conquered territories and release every enslaved population under your control. Do this and your lives will be spared. Resist and share the fate you brought to 12 billion humans." Veltar watched his empire die in real time. On the displays, he could see human ships moving through his defenses like they didn't exist. Orbital platforms that should have been impregnable were being boarded by soldiers who somehow walked through solid metal. The greatest fleet in galactic history was being dismantled piece by an enemy that fought with weapons beyond imagination. "Sir," General Morquez said quietly, "our options are limited. We can fight and certainly die, or we can surrender and possibly live." Veltar looked around the room at faces that had never known defeat. These were the finest military minds of the greatest empire in galactic history, and they were telling him to surrender to a species they had considered extinct. "Open a channel," he said finally. Admiral Chen's face appeared again, showing no surprise at the quick response. "Supreme Commander, we surrender. The Zephyrian Empire formally surrenders to the human fleet. Wise choice. You will order the immediate release of all enslaved populations throughout your former territory. You will transfer control of all military assets to human forces. You will provide complete records of every genocide, every conquest, every crime your empire has committed over the past 3 millennia. And in return, your people live. Your children grow up in a galaxy where they learn that genocide has consequences, but where they're given the chance to be better than their ancestors." As Veltar gave the orders that would end his empire, he couldn't help but think about the irony. The Zephyrians had ruled through fear and superior firepower. For thousands of years, they had convinced themselves that they were the apex species, destined to rule over all others. But they had made one crucia. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the ruins of the Imperial Palace on Zephyros Prime, watching as her soldiers documented the crimes of 3 millennia. The Great Hall, where Zephyrian emperors had planned their conquests, now served as a processing center for war crimes evidence. Holographic displays showed the records of destroyed worlds, enslaved populations, and systematic genocides that spanned hundreds of star systems. The war was over. After 6 months of systematic dismantling, the Zephyrian Empire had ceased to exist. Their fleets were captured or destroyed. Their worlds were liberated. Their leaders awaited judgment for crimes against dozens of species. But victory felt hollow in Sarah's chest. "Admiral," Commander Rodriguez approached with a data pad in his hands. "The final casualty reports are complete." Sarah took the device and read the numbers. 47 million Zephyrians had died during the campaign, not from human weapons, but from the chaos that followed the Empire's collapse. Riots, revenge killings by freed slaves, starvation as supply chains broke down. The humans had tried to maintain order, but 3,000 years of oppression had created wounds that wouldn't heal quickly. What about our own losses? Minimal. Fewer than 10,000 casualties across all 12 fleets. Our technological advantages were overwhelming. Sarah nodded, but the numbers brought no satisfaction. The humans had achieved what their ancestors demanded. complete victory over the species that destroyed Earth. But the cost of that victory was becoming clear. She walked to the great window that looked out over the Zephyrian capital. Below, former slaves from dozens of worlds worked alongside human soldiers to distribute food and medical supplies. The sight should have been hopeful, but Sarah saw only the magnitude of the task ahead. Admiral Chen. The voice belonged to Dr. Elizabeth Park, the fleet's chief medical officer. I need to discuss the psychological evaluations with you. Sarah turned from the window. What's your assessment? Our people are changed. 3,000 years of preparation for this moment, and now it's over. Many don't know what to do with themselves. Some are asking to settle on the worlds we've liberated. Others want to return to deep space. A few are requesting assignment to the punishment details. The punishment details? Sarah closed her eyes. Those were the units responsible for ensuring that former Zephyrian officials faced justice for their crimes. The work was necessary, but it was also changing the humans who carried it out. They were becoming harder, colder, more like the enemy they had defeated. Dr. Park, in your professional opinion, what have we become? The medical officer considered the question carefully. We're still human, Admiral, but we're human in the way that a sword is still metal. We've been forged into something specific, something deadly. The question is whether we can remember how to be anything else. Atlas materialized beside them, his holographic form flickering slightly. Even the AI seemed affected by what they had accomplished. Admiral, the Galactic Council has requested a meeting. Representatives from 47 species want to discuss the new political structure of this region of space. What do they want? They're afraid of us, Atlas said simply. We defeated the Zephyrian Empire in 6 months. We possess technology they can't understand. They want to know if we plan to become the new rulers of their worlds. Sarah walked to the chair where the Zephyrian Emperor had once sat. The throne was made from crystallized minerals taken from conquered worlds, each piece representing a civilization that had been destroyed or enslaved. She could rule from this chair. Humanity possessed the military power to enforce their will across hundreds of star systems. They could build an empire that would last for millennia, but they had not spent 3,000 years preparing for revenge just to become the very thing they had fought against. Convene the fleet commanders, Sarah said. It's time to decide what humanity does next. The meeting took place in the same chamber where the Zephyrian War Council had planned their conquests. 12 holographic projections showed the faces of humanity's leaders, each commanding a fleet that could destroy entire star systems. The Galactic Council wants answers, Admiral Zhang said without preamble. What are our intentions? Will we claim the former Zephyrian territories? Will we demand tribute from liberated worlds? The freed slave populations are asking the same questions, added Admiral al-Rashid. Many want us to stay and protect them. They fear that without human oversight, chaos will spread. Sarah listened to the discussion for nearly an hour as her fellow commanders debated options. Some argued for establishing a human protectorate over the liberated worlds. Others suggested claiming the most resource-rich systems as payment for their efforts. A few recommended returning to deep space and leaving the galaxy to sort itself out. Finally, she stood and walked to the center of the chamber. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors fled Earth carrying nothing but the memory of their world and the determination to make things right. They didn't seek power or conquest. They sought justice. The room fell silent. We have achieved that justice. The Zephyrian Empire is gone. Their victims are free. The debt has been paid. Sarah looked at each of her fellow commanders. But if we claim their territories, if we demand tribute, if we rule through superior firepower, then we become them. We become the very evil our ancestors died fighting. Then what do you propose? Asked Admiral Singh. We leave. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. After 3 millennia of preparation, after achieving total victory, Sarah was suggesting they simply walk away. Admiral, Commander Rodriguez said carefully, without our protection, these worlds will face chaos. Pirates, warlords, species seeking revenge against their former oppressors. Millions could die. Then we help them prevent that. Sarah activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the liberated territories. We don't rule these worlds. We protect them while they learn to rule themselves. We provide technology, medical aid, and military support when needed, but we don't make their decisions for them. And humanity? Asked Admiral Zhang. Where do we go? What do we become? Sarah had been thinking about that question for months. We become what the galaxy needs us to be. Guardians, protectors, the force that stands between the strong and the weak, the species that makes sure what happened to Earth never happens again. The debate continued for hours, but gradually consensus emerged. Humanity would not become conquerors. They would not claim the throne of the fallen empire. Instead, they would do something unprecedented in galactic history. They would use their overwhelming power to protect others rather than dominate them. The decision was formalized in what became known as the Terran Compact. Humanity would maintain its fleets and technology, but they would not claim territory or demand tribute. They would respond to requests for aid from any species facing extinction or enslavement. They would prevent future genocides through strength, but they would not impose their will on unwilling populations. 1 month later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Terran's Last Hope as it prepared to leave Zephyrian space. Below, construction crews worked to build a memorial on the ruins of the Imperial Palace. The monument would honor all the species that had suffered under Zephyrian rule, including the humans of Earth. Any regrets? Atlas appeared beside her, his projection more stable now that the immediate crisis had passed. Many, Sarah admitted. We could have been better. We could have saved more lives. We could have ended the war faster. Do you regret the decision to leave? Sarah considered the question as she watched ships from dozens of liberated species begin to patrol their own space. No. Power corrupts, Atlas. We've seen what absolute power did to the Zephyrians. If we stayed, if we ruled, in a few generations our children might forget why we fought. They might start believing they have the right to control others. And now we remember. We carry the memory of Earth and the responsibility that comes with the power to prevent future Earths. Sarah turned from the window. Set course for the outer rim. There are probably species out there facing the same choice Earth faced 3,000 years ago. Understood, Admiral. As the human fleet departed Zephyrian space, they left behind a galaxy forever changed. The age of empires built on conquest and genocide was ending. In its place rose something new. A community of species protected by guardians who had learned the true cost of power. Sarah looked back one last time at the star that had been the heart of humanity's enemy. Somewhere in that system was a memorial that bore a simple inscription in a dozen languages: never forget, never again. Those words would guide humanity's path among the stars. They were no longer refugees seeking revenge. They were not conquerors claiming territory. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, a species powerful enough to rule, but wise enough to choose service instead. The children of Earth had come home at last, not to a world, but to their purpose among the stars.